All right, so welcome everybody to the UVA Club of Richmond's virtual spring banquet. Unfortunately, we couldn't get together in person for the spring banquet this year, like last year, but that's kind of the way it's been this year. We've been mostly seeing the other members of the club and the other Richmond Who's. We've had to see each other, talk to each other through a screen, but the vaccines are rolling, and hopefully next year, the 2021 year, 2022 year will be a bit different, and maybe we'll get to see each other in person again some. So today, our virtual spring banquet, we have a great speaker lined up, Dr. Daryl Dance. She was very gracious to give us her time today. We're very excited about this. After the program, we will have the awarding of the club's annual Dabney Award, as well as the UVA Club of Richmond Scholarship. Also get a chance to talk some about the winners of those awards last year, since you were unable to do a spring banquet. So with that, I will go ahead and turn things over to Dr. Kendra Pugh, Vice President and Treasurer of the UVA Club of Richmond, to introduce our speaker.
Good morning, everyone. As Jonathan said, I am Dr. Kendra Pugh, and I have the honor of introducing our speaker. Dr. Daryl Dance is Professor Emerita at Virginia Commonwealth University and the University of Richmond. Though she retired in 2012, she continues her work in genealogy, folklore, and literary scholarship. During the pandemic, she turned her attention to creative writing, completing 2 novels and a collection of works in 2020. Dr. Dance is also my sorority sister. She is a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. So please help me welcome Dr. Dance.
Thank you. Thank you, Kendra Pugh and members of the University of Virginia Club of Richmond. I am grateful for this opportunity to speak on a subject that my dear friend and former student, Carmen Foster, provided me by way of Kendra. That subject is my journey to UVA and beyond. As I reflected on my experiences at UVA for this discussion, I realized how varied and contradictory my relationship with UVA has been. From the very beginning, I have faced painful rejections by UVA. But UVA has also been the source of accreditation and affirmation in my life. UVA has knocked me down, but also picked me up. My interaction with UVA began in 1956, excuse me, when at the age of 18, I was preparing to graduate from Virginia State College and eager to go on to graduate school. I had cause to hope that my veritably impossible ambition to study at Virginia's premier university might be realized because Walter Ridley, one of the Black professors at Virginia State, had recently received a PhD from the University of Virginia. I had heard about UVA all my life. I knew that it was, at least they told me, the Harvard of the South. My mother had been born not too far from UVA, and my grandfather had died at the UVA hospital. I eagerly wrote a letter indicating my desire to enter graduate school at the University of Virginia. I received a terse reply suggesting that I consider the state program that provided tuition for Negroes to study in Northern universities. Thus, it seemed that UVA was to remain an unattainable dream, an unseen place where I was not to enjoy the opportunity the state provided its qualified white youth to seek an advanced degree. I therefore quietly gave up my dream of graduate school and sought a teaching job so that I, like my parents and generations of my forebears, could pay taxes to maintain and support first-rate institutions from which we were excluded. Later, Virginia State College developed a master's program in which I enrolled in 1960. Then in 1964, I applied for and was accepted in a summer Ford Foundation Institute in Asian Studies at the University of Virginia. Thus, for the first time that summer, I set foot on the UVA campus. This first association with UVA was overall a pleasant, but not a representative experience of integration at the time, because I was with a diverse and internationally mixed group that was a body unto itself and had all the privileges and respect that such nationally funded institutions enjoy. We studied together and had a number of cultural and funded activities funded by the Ford Foundation. The only difference was that I, the only Black member of the Institute, was housed in a suite in Maupin House, which according to university officials was only coincidentally all Black. This one example of segregated housing at the time when the university insisted it had integrated its facilities was the one harsh reminder that summer of the fact that UVA had not fully opened its doors to me. 3 years later, in 1967, there were signs that not only would I be allowed to enroll in the graduate school at UVA, but that I would indeed be welcome, thanks to the federal government. Thus encouraged, I applied and received admission. My experience as a graduate student was quite different from my experience as a Ford Foundation Fellow, where I had been enveloped in the protective arms of the Ford Foundation program and housed in a suite of Black women. Now I was on my own. I was denied university housing, and it was a lonely and frightening experience. I entered UVA knowing that they perceived me in a certain way, and I was not strong enough not to be influenced by this. When in my first class, each student introduced himself, and I was faced with these white males who had studied with leading scholars at Harvard and Yale and Princeton. I didn't think I could get up and say that I had finished Virginia State College, where there were only 2 professors in the whole master's program, neither of whom anybody at UVA had heard of. As a matter of fact, I don't think any of my UVA classmates had ever heard of Virginia State College. I felt intimidated, I must admit, partly believing that these men must be as brilliant as they say they are and that I was not on a par with them. But as soon as classes started, I recognized that I was pretty well prepared to hold my own, and I appreciated even more the education that I had received at Virginia State College. Throughout my 4 years of graduate study at UVA, I felt certain pressures that most Blacks in such situations feel. First, we continued to find it hard to believe that we were actually studying at the UVAs of this nation. Then any little problem or question of inadequate performance caused us to doubt our capability. And most difficult of all, we proceeded on the assumption that we had to not only succeed, but excel, not just for ourselves, but for our race. The pressure was on us to reverse the centuries-old assumptions and prejudices about the ability of Blacks and to prove to them not only that we were capable, but that Blacks were capable. Luckily, and somewhat surprisingly for me, I entered a department where I found support from the chairman and my advisors. My professors were, as the faculty of the UVA English department has long been, some of the top scholars in the country, and they were, for the most part, a more cosmopolitan than regional body. With only 2 exceptions, they did not seem to regard it as unusual that they had among their students a Black woman, though I was certainly the first Black woman and only the second Black person they had faced at UVA. My 4 years at UVA were challenging and exciting academically, but they were very lonely years. The white males who were the bulk of the population then, 1967, generally did not resort to the crude, blatant, and direct racisms Blacks faced elsewhere when they attempted to integrate. With one exception, there were no physical threats, no verbal abuses. These students, always attired in dress shirts and ties, generally opened doors for ladies and jumped to provide all the gentlemanly services, but they seemed not to know what to do about me. I was never sure how to proceed, since some certainly weren't about to open a door for me, and others seemed nonplussed if not allowed the opportunity to do so. But being able to easily open a door on my own, the real difficulty for me was that I had no network of fellow students with whom to study. A few male students did ask to see my notes when they missed class, and one later returned the favor. But beyond that, I had no collegial interaction with my fellow male students. For a few months, I carpooled with one white female student. I met one other white female student with whom I sometimes talked and occasionally had lunch, though I never recalled our studying together. Except for a gathering of class members at a professor's home, the only social activity in which I ever attempted to engage remains a rather painfully embarrassing moment. The Duplicate Bridge Club always announced its play in the Cavalier Daily. One evening, another Black graduate student and I decided to attend. We had trouble finding parking and walked in about 2 minutes after the announced time. Two older white ladies seated at the door brusquely informed us that we couldn't play because we were late. Quietly, we began to retreat since indeed we were late, whereupon two young white male students standing nearby rushed after us and insisted we come back. At their insistence, we were seated and they stayed with us until we received everything we needed to participate in the game. We could not help but note that a number of white players came in even later and were casually admitted. The evening proceeded with a mixture of responses, warm welcomes and invitations to return from some, and cold, icy stares from others. The Duplicate Bridge Club did not announce its play in later issues of the Cavalier Daily for some time after that, and I never returned to another game. The one blatantly racist incident that I recall is one that I don't believe I ever mentioned to a soul, not even my family, until I was asked to write an article in which I finally decided to recount it. One evening, while I was studying at the library, a man bent over me, placing his hands on the table at either side of me and pressing his mouth to my ear, making it impossible for me to turn my head. He then proceeded to whisper obscenities and racial slurs in my ear for what seemed like 10 minutes, but probably was only a couple of seconds. Shocked, I sat there wordless, hardly daring to breathe. I never saw his face, only those hands which were pressed intensely against the table, and I felt his breath hot against my ear and neck. I was so unnerved that I sat there without moving for several more minutes after his diatribe mercifully ended. I've often regretted that I couldn't bring myself to turn around and see who he was, because after that evening, I was left to ponder which of the hundreds of white male hands I saw every day belonged to that vicious racist. I proceeded through my 4 years at UVA with a mixture of a few uncomfortable incidents and many very exciting and illuminating classes. It was disconcerting, however, that at the time of the Black Arts Movement, I was enrolled in a school where I never saw a Black professor, never read a book written by a Black author in any of my classes, never, I don't believe, even heard the name of a Black writer mentioned in a class. Some sense of rebellion or frustration led me to request to choose James Baldwin as my major figure for my PhD orals. I actually perceived my request as purely symbolic, and I had already resigned myself to choosing a white figure whom I was certainly better prepared to interpret and discuss than any Black author. But surprise of surprises, my committee agreed to allow me to satisfy my major figure requirement with Baldwin and a demonstrable knowledge of contemporary Black American literature, which was satisfied by including a work by 9 other Black authors. I was enraged at this affront. This was an unquestionably racist rejection, worse than the often presumed reduction of a Black man to 3/5 of a white man in the US Constitution. But UVA's response opened up a whole new world for me, set me on a totally new and exciting career path. Then I finally reached the dissertation stage in my studies. I decided to propose a dissertation on wit and humor in Black American literature. Again, I was shocked. Permission was granted. I found myself in a situation like the Black man in the folktale who ordered a meal in a segregated restaurant and then had no money to pay when they actually served him. Here I was, setting out to write a dissertation on a subject that I had never studied in a class, never written a paper on. I knew nothing of Black literature beyond those 10 works I had read to fulfill my major figure. There was no one on the faculty at the time who had any background in that area. Fortunately, Dr. J.D. Levinson, a brilliant Stephen Crane, Henry Adams, and Mark Twain scholar, kindly agreed to serve as my advisor. Both of us clearly unprepared and clumsily charting our path as we went along. Actually, I did the charting, and Dr. Levinson listened, interrogated, and advised when I reported to him. As I was ending up the work on my dissertation, one of the promising young Black scholars in the field, Houston Baker, was appointed to the UVA faculty, and he was the first authority in the field to read and critique my dissertation in one of its later drafts. His feedback and his continuing guidance and professional support were critical for a scholar entering the field. He influenced my first book publication, invited me to participate in my first CLA panel, encouraged me to pursue new paths, offered the kind of mentoring that I would never have had UVA not finally hired a scholar of African American literature. My dissertation was successfully completed and a PhD was granted in 1971. I immediately set out to expand the first chapter of my dissertation into a book, as Houston Baker had advised. I excitedly submitted that book, Shuckin and Jivin, to the University Press of Virginia. But that press would not even look at it. The manuscript was, however, eagerly accepted by Indiana University Press and came out with a glowing review from the noted scholar Richard M. Dawson in the New Republic and a lavish book launching at Indiana. Soon after publishing, I, who had never had a course in folklore or African American literature, was being celebrated and compared to Zora Neale Hurston as a leading scholar of African American literature and folklore. Again, a rejection by UVA had led to greener pastures. Over the years, the University of Virginia offered numerous invitations to me. I served for a number of years on the Arts and Sciences Council. I was a part of the colloquium planning for the Virginia Center for the Humanities. Some years later, I received a grant to do research on a book at the Virginia Center for the Humanities. I was invited to lecture at the university on a number of occasions. In those later years, I was in fact often treated as an esteemed graduate. but the ups and downs of my relationship with UVA continued. The University Press of Virginia rejected another of my books, though they at least considered it that time. Then that same press started seeking my help, reviewing a number of books in my field, and ultimately they invited me to serve on their board of directors. In the meantime, I was publishing books with a number of other presses and receiving recognition for my studies of folklore, of women, and of humor. Indeed, Honey Hush, an anthology of African-American women's humor, is often praised as the leading book of African-American women's humor and earned me the title Dean of American Folklorists. Reflecting on my journey to the University of Virginia and beyond, I recognize the irony that if all had gone according to plan when I began my graduate studies, I would probably have been just another small fry writing about William Faulkner and Ernest Hemingway and Theodore Dreiser. It was the racism and the rejection at UVA that led me into African American studies, a new enough field for me to do pioneering scholarship. It was a rejection from the University Press of Virginia that led me to major presses such as W.W. Norton. But there is no doubt that it was the prestige of the UVA doctorate that opened doors to all the universities, presses, foundations, and honors that have been a part of my journey. Just as I was settling into retirement after a long career as a university professor, I was approached by the University of Virginia Library, requesting that I give my papers to them. What a distinct honor. I love that library. I have always been grateful for its remarkable holdings, for the helpful librarians who supported my research, for the many hours I spent going through its card catalogs, its book stacks, its archives. And now they wanted my writings and correspondence, my works and reflections, my speeches and tapes to be a part of their holdings. I quickly started looking through my files, planning to organize my papers to make this gift to the university, or at least to leave everything in order for the material to be passed on to them. In the process, I looked again at almost forgotten manuscripts gathering dust on my bookshelves. Then the pandemic struck. Everything closed down. Who knew what tomorrow would bring? I looked at some of those rediscovered manuscripts and decided I didn't want to leave them for possibly posthumous publication, likely edited by who knows who stumbled upon them in the UVA library archives. I have been disappointed, indeed sometimes practically furious, about the posthumous publications of my favorite writers, Theodore Dreiser, Richard Wright, Zora Neale Hurston, Ralph Ellison, Toni Cade Bambara. I didn't want the same thing to happen with my writings. I spent the first year of the pandemic in isolation, completing and bringing out 4 books, 2 of which had rather extended passages about the University of Virginia. At the age of 82, I didn't want to risk the time it would take to submit them to the review of standard publishers. It had taken approximately 8 years to bring out my last book, In Search of Annie Drew. Let us see this book now. In Search of Annie Drew, the mother and muse of Jamaica, Kincaid, published in 2016 by the University of Virginia Press. Yes, one of my books finally published by UVA. Well, I decided, therefore, to publish these pandemic books with the help of companies where I could retain full control and move a little faster. And so I published in 2020, along with my daughter, a revised genealogy, the lineage of Abraham, and let us see that genealogy here, with my daughter, Daryl Dance, I published also my first novel, Till Death Us Did Part, a story of 4 widows. I published my first historical novel, Land of the Free Negroes. And I published a miscellaneous collection of meditations, memoirs, and stories growing out of the pandemic, titled Here Am I. This last book created some publication complications despite all of my efforts. To help you understand, I want you to know that I had refused to put my picture on any of my 10 pre-pandemic books. But for this last one, because it focused on me and my dealing with the pandemic and my isolation, I needed to use a picture of me in my Delta shirt, wandering through the woods. I insisted that the picture be on the front cover. The publisher rejected my proposal, but here am I. It's in print with me on the front in my Delta shirt. As a result of my stubbornness, the book is available only from the author. I have been shocked and delighted at the responses of virtual audiences, book clubs, and other readers who have come upon my recent writings, and we can take these down now. Many of those readers are shocked and delighted at the recent output of their rather proper and upstanding professor and friend. Several write to say they couldn't put the books down. A number have related to the characters and stories. And this is the response that has given me the most pleasure. Some said they had met these ladies, even one of them telling me where. One declared the stories as familiar as the smell of honeysuckle. Several have insisted the new novel, Till Death Us Did Part, should be made into a movie. Nikki Giovanni has publicly declared that a movie couldn't do it justice. It should be serialized. It's been amazing to make the change from literary critic and folklorist to novelist at the age of 82. I can't get over the difference in the reviews of my works. Now, I've had damning and glowing reviews of my critical work, but never anything like the recent description of me as this savvy octogenarian who still has fire in her belly. I'm loving it. So, ladies and gentlemen, fellow cavaliers, wahoos, whoos, this in brief is the story of my journey. From beginning to end, that journey has been impacted by my sometimes racist, sometimes supportive, always distinguished and prestigious alma mater. I thank not only the individuals and agencies of UVA who supported and encouraged me, but also those who slammed doors and denied help, thereby forcing me into some of the most rewarding paths I have trod. And finally, I thank you, the Richmond Club of UVA, for allowing me to share my journey with you and the rest of our audience today. Let's all join hands and praise the good old UVA. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Dance. So now we're going to start the Q&A portion. If anybody has any questions they would like to ask Dr. Dance, just send them to me in the chat and I can get them over to her. So first question, do you feel as if the opportunities for African Americans in our country have continued to improve through the last 5 decades? And are you hopeful this will improve even more going forward?
Well, there's no question that there's been some improvement, but there's no question also that a great deal of improvement needs to be made. At all of my universities right now, and especially the one where I taught last, the University of Richmond, Black students with many white students as well, and faculty are in arms. At UVA, you have recently completed a great monument to the Black slaves who helped to build that university. So much is being done, but much needs to be done. And much more needs to be done, I think, to do what needs to be done to be sure that the Black students who are coming into these universities now get the support that they need. One thing that I'm very proud about the University of Virginia is that for many years, and I'm not sure it may still be the case this year, UVA has stood out for graduating a larger percent of Black students who entered its doors than some other universities. So there's a lot of work needed to be done, but there is no question that there have been advancements. When I came along, Black students were not at William and Mary, and for the most part, not at the University of Virginia, not at any of the largely white schools. And that certainly is no longer the case.
All right, again, if anyone has any questions, you can just send them my way in the chat.
I might say, since I see my son here, that when I finished UVA, I declared that I would not allow my children to go to UVA because I wanted them to enjoy the social life and so forth that they would have enjoyed at the time. But of course, some years later, it was very interesting that my first child decided that the one college on his list was UVA. And I realized that I may have had something to do with that because I had exposed my husband my husband also did a master's at UVA, had exposed him to UVA. So, you know, I realized that this son made me change my mind about that. And though I don't think he would say everything was perfect at UVA, I was so pleased about the great experience that he had there in undergraduate school and in law school.
All right, that was a very good answer to a question that actually just came in. So if anyone else has any questions, they can send them my way. All right, Dr. Dance, what tips do you have for those who want to start or further their writing?
Well, I always say do a lot of reading, whatever it is you're interested in writing about or whatever genre you're interested in writing in. Be sure that you do reading, do research, but do a lot of writing. And I don't think the first thing needs to be the goal to write a book. I always tell my students, write letters, keep a journal, do a diary, write a long letter, surprise your parents with a 3-page letter, telling them details about your day, not just everything's fine or I'm having a hard time. So I suggest do a lot of writing, do a lot of practice, do a lot of reading, and then finally do the planning and sit down and give it a try. Most writers have a lot of rejections, and certainly I've had my share. Understand that the first book may not be grabbed up immediately by an agent, a publicist, a publisher, and so forth. But I think the main thing is to write, read, listen to it. And when I say listen to it, I mean read aloud what you've written. And there comes a point when you recognize, when you read a certain passage, that this is it. I've achieved what I want to do. I've communicated what I want to communicate. I've captured the voice that I want to capture. It's a lot of hard work, but it certainly is a very rewarding kind of thing. There's nothing more rewarding than finally holding in your hand a book that you have. And most of my books I worked on for certainly 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. So it's a long process. Though at the age of 82, I realized I didn't have much time for many years. So my last ones were done more quickly.
All right. What have you noticed about the openness of students to diversity in the curriculum over your years as a university professor? Do students today want to learn from diverse authors, scholars, and cultures?
Well, let me say, I've been out of the classroom for what, 11 years, 10 years now. So I'm sure that I probably don't know enough to respond completely and fully to your question. I do have opportunities occasionally to make lectures and to meet some students and so forth. When I first started, there was a kind of excitement, enthusiasm from students who had literally fought to get African-American courses offered on their campuses. And so there was great enthusiasm then. I think now it's not something new that excites students because of its newness. But I think, as I have observed, African-American studies in African-American history, culture, and other areas continue to be reasonably popular at universities. Of course, a part of popularity of courses is determined by the scholars, professors who teach those courses. So I encourage universities to continue to build programs to bring in well-known scholars, good scholars, outstanding professors, and scholars in the field. And that will, without a doubt, encourage students to enter those courses. And in some instances, they will be not entering the courses, registering for the courses, not because they are African-American courses, but because this is a great course in literature, or a great course in psychology, or a great course in other areas.
All right. Your work seems like something that should be in all our history books. How can educators share your work in Black folklore, beginning even with young children?
Well, that's interesting. I'm grateful for that, and I'm grateful for the reception I have had to some of my my work. My first collection of folklore, I was determined to bring out the folklore exactly as it was, without
hear anything.
without editing it. So works like Shuckin and Jivin cannot be incorporated in courses for young children. But certainly there are a number of people who have covered the materials that we cover there. And as a matter of fact, in a later book, I myself did some editing to some of those so that it could be included in works for children. I'm pleased that most of these works are in libraries, and I encourage you to have those works that are acceptable for young readers in the libraries of elementary schools. And I think that as you, well, for one thing, I think many of us can give gifts to young people. This is something I've always done. For Christmas at my house, everybody receives a book for a gift. So we need to do things to introduce. Sometimes these works are included in history, sometimes they are not. But if not, I think all of us as parents, as teachers, can take on the responsibility to be sure that our children grow up knowing the dimensions, the fuller dimensions of their history, their arts, their culture, and so forth.
All right, related to UVA's leading graduation rate for Black students, do you attribute that to the students, professors, or administrative involvement at UVA?
I am sure it's a part of both. Now, mind you, it's not something that I have studied. It's just that I have looked and seen, oh, UVA has the highest rate of graduates. And is that still the case right now? Or do you know?
I don't know.
But to get back to your question, it's something that does not happen without a great deal of effort. We have to recognize that whenever we bring students on our campus, and this Black, white, any students, we have to provide them a full range of the opportunities that they require, beginning with housing, with classes, with teachers, with help if they are having emotional problems, with activities that are available to them, and of course, with counselors there to guide them. And I am quite sure that in the case of University of Virginia and other schools that have been successful, a great deal of that success relates to the students. And there has to be a recognition sometimes with students that we bring into our universities that some of them need some extra help, some extra counseling, some extra tutoring. And the provision of those kinds of services are very important as well. And one of the other things that was so missing for me to some degree at UVA until Houston Baker came along was a mentor. I had fantastic professors at the University of Virginia, but this was no one who sort of picked me up to offer mentoring. And this is something we certainly need to offer on the undergraduate level as well.
All right. Can you talk about your experience in the Charles City school systems and growing up in Charles City?
Yes, I'd love to. I'll have to try to control myself because I have so much to say about that. Charles City, and many people in the audience probably never heard of Charles City, is a small county with a large Black population, used to be majority Black population. I'm not sure that that's the same now, but it's a very poor county, had no industries or anything like that. And it was a poor county with 3 school systems: a white school system, an Indian school system, and a Black school system. I grew up, obviously, in the Black school system, but I was fortunate to come from a family of highly educated and hard workers. And this family provided education for Black children, I'm quite certain, during the days of slavery, because as soon as slavery was ended and the Freedmen's Bureau came to Charles City, they found a great uncle of mine, I think, teaching a class in the Black church there. That Black community built schools through the years. They built the schools. A little bit later, the county started helping with Black schools. But my family, and I say my family, I'm talking about a large range from the generation of Abraham, who is the subject of that first book that the second book we brought up. They're great educators. In the 19th century, my grandfather and 2 of my uncles were in Harvard Law School and medical school. So this little school system set people off to do great work. And despite the fact that the Blacks did not receive the kind of support when I was growing up in the school systems that the whites received, the Black schools were superior in terms of the education of their teachers to the white schools at the time. So I had a wonderful education. People stepped in to do things. People would have thought, oh, those poor people there. We didn't even have a library in the county until, 2 years ago, I think. But next door to me, my cousin lived, and her library was my library. And I went every week to her house and got books because she was constantly buying books. So I grew up in a community of educators, people who influenced me, people who taught me, people who supported me, and people who raised me to know that I could achieve and I had to achieve.
All right, we've got 2 more questions, or I guess 3, because this one's kind of a 2-parter. But what are you most proud of, and what is your next project?
I think I am most proud of something that I mentioned when I was speaking, and that is the impact that some of my work has had on some people. I get calls quite frequently from people who say, I've read such and such a book, and this had an impact on my life. Actually, this was a UVA professor who wrote to me when I did Shuckin and Jivin, which is a collection of Black women's humor, and said to me, I keep Shuckin and Jiving on my bed table, and every night before I go to sleep, I read a piece from Shuckin and Jiving. I don't mean Shuckin and Jiving, I mean Honey Hush, Honey Hush. I'm using the wrong title there. I read a piece from Honey Hush every night before I go to bed, and I wake up each morning with a smile. And I've had people call me and say their parents or their grandparents have read a book and there was a story there that meant so much to them. I have people call me and say they've read the genealogy and they're working on a genealogy and it's an impact on them. So what means the most to me is not the critics whose applause makes our careers, but it's the regular people who react to, respond to, relate to, and enjoy the works that that I've written. And of course, many of the works that I've written, I haven't so much written as collected. That is, the stories and jokes and tales and so forth that I have collected and that have become a part of some of these stories. I don't take the credit for writing them in all cases, but I am grateful and proud for the opportunity to have brought them together and to have presented them in such a way that they're more available to a wider audience. I'm trying to remember now, in response to your question, and I know I can't quote this right now, but I was so pleased by one person who wrote to me and said of the folklore that I have written, by the time I finish reading this, I know that I am the folk. So.
All right, and I think this is our last question. What do you attribute your good health and vitality to?
I don't know about the good health. I don't know about the, the vitality. My daughter and I went out for a walk yesterday, and it was the longest walk, which doesn't mean much, that I had done during this period. And I try to walk every day. And I came home and planning to watch 2 TV shows and fell asleep on both of them. So I don't know about vitality, but I do encourage everybody to watch your health, to know what you should do, to know what you should eat, to know what contributes both to your physical health and your mental health. There's nothing more important in achieving anything than you, the person, you yourself. And it is very important to try to stay healthy. And also one of the things that's very interesting to me is this period of pandemic, this pandemic period, so to speak. I knew I was in a situation that is not conducive to great emotional and mental health. But I have found ways with the help of my family. I have 3 children and 2 grandchildren. With the help of my family, I found ways not to be alone, not to be lonely, not to be pessimistic, not to be depressed, but to find ways. And writing has been one way. I don't know whether I said this in the other question you asked me, but writing is therapy. Writing is therapeutic. And as I have dealt with certain issues, for example, issues of aging, I've written 3 stories I love so much about a lady sort of in my predicament, aging, and a bit forgetful, and so forth. So you deal with some of your problems in a number of ways. I get up every morning to do my stretches and put on some good blues music, and I dance around and do my stretches and what have you. Try to stay active, try to have a positive view on life, try to keep in touch with your loved ones. Even though I haven't had a hug, well, I had one yesterday. for my daughter who came to see me. But I've spent over a year without a hug. But hug people in other different ways, and always do something for someone else. Be grateful for the blessings you have and share those blessings. Share them in different ways. Gifts of money, gifts of concern, gifts of notes of love and expression, gifts of teaching, gifts of books. Give, that helps you to be enriched as well.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Dance. We are absolutely honored that you were able to join us today, and grateful for your time. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
All right. For everyone watching, in the chat, we put a PDF. It contains all the information about Dr. Dance's books and how you can order them. So definitely check that out. Just want to reiterate how absolutely honored and grateful the UVA Club of Richmond was to be able to have Dr. Dance speak at our virtual spring banquet this year. So with that, we can move on to the awards portion of the virtual spring banquet. For those who weren't in at the beginning, my name's Jonathan Hall. I'm the president of the UVA Club of Richmond. You can find all the information on the club at rvahoo's.org. You can find all of our future events coming up there. You can register for membership. Also, there's a contact form there if you want to get involved with a committee for our 21-22 year coming up, whether you would like to get involved with social events, charitable events, what you name it, we would definitely love to have you involved. So you can head to our website for more information, or just reach out to me. I'll actually put my email in the chat coming up here soon. So with that, I would like to turn things over to Darlene Davidson Harvey. She is our Dabney chair, and she is in charge of finding a worthy recipient for our Dabney Award, awarded to an outstanding fourth year at UVA from the Richmond area each year. So I will turn things over to Darlene.
Alrighty, the Dabney Award is named for Richard Heath Dabney, who was a longtime history professor at the university in the early 1900s and was a true icon around the university in his day. The award recognizes a fourth-year student from the Richmond area who has excelled in the areas of leadership, scholarship, and community service during his or her years at the university. The 2020 Dabney recipient received BA degrees in both economics with a concentration of public policy and mathematics. His combined GPA from both majors was 3.89. He was on the dean's list for all 8 semesters. He was an Echo Scholar, a Raven Scholar, and a National Merit Scholar. He attended Maggie Walker's Governor's School and hails from the Cosby High School area of Chesterfield County. Although he did quite a bit of research for both the economic department at UVA and other top university leaders, his main leadership to the university included serving on the honors committee and serving as the student representative to the Board of Visitors. As the vice chair for community relations for the honor committee, he worked with over a dozen student groups working with underrepresented students working on diverse advocacy. He coordinated a collaborative effort between faculty, student, and local leaders to implement diversity reforms. As the student representative to the Board of Visitors, he pushed for board members to actually hear current student voices and to look at things from these current student perspectives, not as recollections from their memories as students, since the times are definitely different. To help get this across to the board members, he often used his speaking opportunities to bring in other students to present on topics important to them and advocate for their causes, for example, mental health. And to ensure that the student representative on the board following him was prepared to serve actively as soon as their term began, he mentored them, gave them background information on current topics being discussed, explained procedures on how the board operates, etc., so that no time was wasted learning the ropes. Transferring this institutional knowledge assured that the student representative was effective in putting forth the concerns and ideas of students immediately. He is currently working for Bates White, a consulting firm in Washington, D.C., doing antitrust economic analysis. Bates Whites does a lot of work with the federal government. So without further ado, let me introduce our 2020 Richard Heath Dabney Award winner, Mr. Derek Wang. I asked Derek to say a few words to you by answering the following. Please tell us what you learned about yourself during your years at UVA, and how did your UVA experience and education prepare you for the work world and the next phase of your life? And what have you missed most about the university this past year? And I believe Derek is joining us today.
Yes,
Yay!
here I am. Thank you so much, Darlene. Thank you for that great introduction. And thank you for having me here. I'm really pleased to be here. It's nice to see everybody and nice to be reconnected with UVA people after a year. I am really grateful for my time at UVA. I learned so much. And I think one of the most important things that I got out of that experience was the importance of curiosity and always being open to new experiences. I didn't go into UVA thinking that I would be on the honor committee necessarily or be in any leadership positions at the university, but I always wanted to be open to new experiences and to push myself and think of ways that I could contribute to the community and build something. And so when you're at the university, you only have 4 years to make a difference. And after your 4 years there as an undergraduate, there's a new set of students, new set of people, and new set of issues and priorities and conversations that are happening. But each year, your goal is to just push the ball forward a little bit and to make whatever progress that you can. And regardless of whether people remember you or don't remember you, however small that difference is, you're moving the ball forward and you're making progress. So I think that openness to new experiences and curiosity that I got through UVA was one of the most valuable things that I got out of my time there. And of all the things I miss, I definitely miss all of my friends. It's been a very strange year. I think for all of the 2020 graduates, I think the spring of our 4th year was very difficult because people got scattered all across the country. So we're definitely all looking forward to reconnecting with each other and finding out where people ended up, hopefully this May or next May at graduation. So thank you again for the award. Thank you again for having me here. I'm so grateful and really excited to be here.
It's really nice to see you since we didn't get to see each other when we were doing everything over conference calls. So hopefully I'll get to see you later on in the summer.
Yep.
Thank you. This year's recipient is a degree candidate for a BS degree in kinesiology with a minor in health and well-being later this month. Her current GPA in her major is 3.71. Her current combined GPA is 3.23. She attended James River High School. Her leadership to the university included serving as a leader in the kinesiology club, preparing students for careers in kinesiology, and serving as a peer mentor within the kinesiology major student group. And as a member of the UVA Pre-Physical Therapy Club, she mentored students of all grade levels on the preparations to applying for physical therapy school. Her community service included being an inpatient therapy technician at UVA Encompass Health Hospital, where she worked directly with patients, sometimes more with actual therapy and sometimes as more of an advocate voice for the patients. Also being a volunteer at the Haven Homeless Shelter in Charlottesville, where her official task was cook, but the most welcome part was conversation and social connectiveness. Also being patient emissary at the Transitional Care Hospital in Charlottesville, where she was the one who answered the patient bell calls and assisted them with various needs and provided companionship for those patients with long stays. And also being a volunteer with Adopt Grandparent through Madison House, where she engaged in fun and meaningful activities with the senior at a local health and rehab center in Charlottesville. Future plans include going to graduate school. In fact, she starts a 3-year program in late August in Shenandoah University. And before anybody gets upset, UVA did not offer a graduate program in physical therapy, so that's why she had to go somewhere else. So without further ado, let me introduce our 2021 Richard Heath Dabney Award winner, Ms. Hannah E. Bailey. I asked Hannah to say a few words by answering, as graduation nears, please tell us what you have learned about yourself during your 4 years at UVA, and how has your UVA experience in education prepared you for your work world and the next phase of your life? And what do you think you will miss the most about university next year? Hannah?
Thanks, Darlene, for that introduction, and to the alumni chapter for organizing this event for everyone. I'm really excited to be here and talk a little bit about my experience at UVA. As graduation draws near, I've been doing a lot of reflecting on my 4 years here, and I think the biggest lesson I've learned about myself is just to have confidence in the fact that my ability and my skills don't necessarily depend on a grade on a test or how I perform in the classroom. Coming to UVA, I felt like a little bit of a small fish in a big pond because everyone at UVA is extremely intelligent, and I had a hard time finding where I belonged and how I was going to really become part of the UVA community. So that's when I ended up joining Madison House, which is UVA's local volunteer club. And through the volunteer experiences that Darlene mentioned, I learned that I have the ability to really make an impact on others by just being open-minded and bringing an optimistic attitude to everything that I do at UVA and beyond. And I think by immersing myself in other things except for just studying and just classwork, I've realized that I can really have an impact on other people and the local community that I am in now and then in the future. And I think that grades are just like a very small part of that. So I think that newfound confidence in myself has really led me to a career in physical therapy, because I'll get to utilize these skills of interacting with others and hopefully making a positive impact on all my future patients' lives as well. And I think for my educational experience at UVA, obviously my classes in the kinesiology department have really prepared me for physical therapy school. But I think the classes that I took outside of my major, like sociology, anthropology, have really kind of pushed my boundaries and opened my mind to other topics that I'd never really thought about before. And I think this will really help me in my next chapter of my life, because I'll have the skills of being able to interact with others who might disagree with me. And it's really opened my mind to new ways of thinking and ways of collaborating with others through a lot of discussion-based classes I've had at UVA. Which I think will be especially important in the healthcare field when working with doctors and other therapists. And then I think finally, the thing that I'll miss most about UVA, like what Derek said, is just the friends that I've made here. I think I'm in a little bit of a unique situation because I've had the same friends since my first year of college. We all lived in the same dorm and we've been together every year. So I think I'm just going to miss being able to walk down the road and spend time with my friends. And I've had so many great memories here in Charlottesville, like eating lunch on the lawn, winning a basketball national championship. I'm going to miss that community aspect of UVA just as much as I'll miss my friends. And with this last year being so different with COVID, I'm just grateful I got to spend it here in Charlottesville with my friends. So as we soak up our last couple of weeks here, I just want to say thank you again for nominating me and accepting me for this award and for putting this event together for us. I'm really grateful.
Thank you. Good luck. And I hope to see you over the summer. So.
Thank you, Darlene, and congratulations to Derek and Hannah. Very, very well deserved. So with that, we will turn to the club's annual scholarship. And I will turn things over to Matt Taylor, our scholarship chair.
My name's Matt Taylor. I'm the chairman of the scholarship committee. We're at a point where we're trying to get more attention for our scholarship, which has been going on for 4 years. And in the last 4 years, we've had access to the accepted students in the Richmond area, and we've given them the opportunity to apply for a scholarship directly from our club. And that scholarship, when we're putting together the idea for it, we realized that there was many ways that the academics of each student could be recognized, and almost impossible to decide between so many qualified students. So we looked at a different aspect of their experience and tried to identify people who are really active leaders in their community. Whether it's through philanthropy, community service, volunteering, any of those sort of things. And they sort of took a role that stood out. And in the process, we've been able to identify some great students and award them with a $2,000 scholarship that our club has put together. Just a few, I was going to look at a few of the topics that our previous winners have excelled in. One had worked to create a sort of a peer mentorship program in the interest of preventing teen suicide and other depression issues. We had another student that was a refugee and a new immigrant to America who has gone out in her community and found other people to sort of help them integrate themselves better into the community. And we also had a student who founded a chapter that brought entrepreneurs and innovation leaders to speak with some of her classmates and give people sort of that positive experience to the business world and the world creation. She even worked on women in engineering as one of their projects. So we found some really good students this year. We've identified another, but unfortunately I haven't gotten in touch with him to sort of invite him and introduce him to all of y'all. But the club has sort of recognized that one of the big founding goals of the club going back 30 or 40 years was to find the best students in the Richmond area and ensure that they had the ability to go to UVA. And so we think that this scholarship, though not as large as some of the previous ones, is something that will encourage these kids to participate at UVA and to participate in their continued community service. This year, we're trying to sort of up our fundraising goals. And if you are on our mailing lists and various things, you may find out more about these students that have won in the past and may have the opportunity to donate to help fund these scholarships and perhaps even increase it in the future. But real proud of the efforts that our committees put together and the fact that the club has backed this as a way to find those students and sort of share their participation in their community and to continue to encourage the best people to go to UVA that we can. So hopefully we'll send out some more information on our newest winner and on information on how you can get involved and help out the committee as well. Thanks.
All right, well, that wraps everything up for today. Again, another huge thank you to Dr. Daryl Dance. So grateful she was able to be here with us today. So just grateful she could volunteer her time. And again, another congratulations to the Dabney winners. Again, website rvahus.org. You can go there to find any information you need about the club's upcoming events or getting involved. And yeah, thanks everybody for coming and hope to see you at future events soon, maybe in person some. So take care.